Man, what a weekend of college football. What a Saturday. It's always, I know I've said it a few times on this show before already this year, that it's always the weekends that don't have a lot of key matchups, the weekends that deliver on a consistent basis, and we had that happen this weekend. We had some marquee matchups. You know, you had Alabama, Oklahoma, you had Georgia, Texas, but man, the matchups delivered. They were, Alabama and Oklahoma was a really good football game. Then likewise, you had history pretty much. SEC teams were 0-286, I think, when trailing by 27 plus points at halftime. And Shane Beamer and the South Carolina Gamecocks find a way to screw it up. So there's that. Also, Clemson shows some signs of life. Dabo and that team that a lot of people thought were dead in the water. Made me think about Clemson. I wasn't going to talk about them, but earlier I had me a Pop-Tart as a little snack after lunch, in between lunch and dinner. Had me a Pop-Tart, and I thought, you know what? Clemson, because they're probably going to end up playing in the Pop-Tart Bowl. So maybe think of Clemson. So Clemson showed some signs of life Friday night as well. Ole Miss had to kind of fight against a, Florida team. Notre Dame blows out Pitt. I mean, just all in all, a lot of things went how we thought they were going to go. Georgia Tech, though, got into a 4-quarter dogfight with a 1-9 Boston College team. And at one point, Boston College, was up by 2 scores. Georgia Tech had to outscore Boston College 19-6 in the fourth quarter to come back and win that football game. So wild, and also makes me kind of rethink my position on Georgia Tech in the playoff rankings, being my 12th ranked team in my edition of the rankings, like anybody really cares what my edition of the rankings are. But, I had Georgia Tech in my 12th spot. Probably going to have to rethink that moving forward after that display that we saw from them on Saturday. So jumping right into things here, it's always, the Monday show's always reviewing the weekend's action. And the weekend, like I said, there was no shortage of it. It was one of those weekends I enjoy, because sometimes, and you'll get what I'm saying here, if you're a college football fan like I am, football fan in general, there are times where you have a weekend where there's so many big games. I mean, there's like 8, 9, 10 big games, ranked matchups, whatever. And it's just hard to keep track of all of them. You can't, unfortunately, and I have done it before, you can watch 8 or 9 or 10 games at a time. It's difficult. It's difficult to pay attention to 8, 9, or 10 games at a time. You can definitely have that many screens if you use a streaming service or whatever that allows you to use the quad box or the 4-screen, split screen looking thing. If you utilize that on 2 different devices, on a TV and say a computer monitor or something like that, then you might pull up a game on your phone. You might watch 9 games. You might have a 4-way screen on your TV. You might have a 4-way screen on a desktop like computer. You might have a 4-way screen on your laptop. And you might have 12 games. Don't ask me how I know that. I know I have a problem. I'm seeing somebody about it. So anyway, and I know a lot of you too. A lot of you do too. If you're college football, you're just a sicko for college football like I am. Then you have a problem as well. Problem you don't want cured. So I love football. So getting into some things. So first things first, we're going to talk about the sign of life that we saw from Clemson. And I know this wasn't a game that I picked on Thursday's prediction show, just really an unranked Clemson team versus an overrated Louisville team. Really didn't see the need in picking this game. Not really, unless you're looking to bet, these games like this. There's really no need for me to cover them. I just try to cover the big matchups of the weekend. But this game was actually, I watched a pretty good bit of it. It was pretty boring. Both teams were horrendous on third down, terrible. Clemson was 1 of 13, Louisville's 2 of 11. And, each team committed 1 turnover, but the issue with Louisville is the big key metric. They ran the football well against Clemson. The issue was very, very, untimely penalties in this game. 84 penalty yards for Louisville in this football game, 10 penalties. I believe there at least half of them maybe more, came on third down. If I remember correctly, Louisville would have like a 3rd and 8 or something and would get a hold, now 3rd and 18. Just Louisville put themselves in positions in tough spots all night. You're not, and I don't care how good people think you are, because personally, I mean, I thought this team was decent. I never thought this team was worthy of being, ranked where they were even last week and, everything being ranked up there. Really haven't seen a whole lot from this team, and it's also in a league that, the ACC as a whole this year has just been very, underwhelming. We haven't seen a team out of that league this year that's like sets themselves apart from the rest of the league. So when you look at a Louisville team, that you look at their schedule, you look at they beat, it's not as impressive as we thought it would have been if you'd have shown me Louisville's schedule and not showed rankings next to teams' names and said they've beat this team, this team, this team. I'd be like, okay, man, they got a pretty decent squad this year. But the ACC, as the year has developed, has determined to be just a league of misfits, a league of, I mean, if we had the opportunity for an ACC team to not make the college football playoff, I think it would definitely happen. It's not a league that's very good from top to bottom at all. I mean, Miami, when they're playing their A game, they can play with a lot of the top teams in the country. Unfortunately for them, though, we haven't seen their A game but just a handful of times this year. But when they're bad, they're really bad. So, but Clemson gets the dub 2019 over Louisville on the road at L&N Stadium there in Louisville, Kentucky. Win for Dabo and the guys, gets them to 5-5, gets them back to 500. I think it's more or less this point, they're playing for pride in Clemson. I think that realistically, 7-5 is on the table for this Clemson team. I think given how this Clemson team started, and we were like a month into the season, and they had the Georgia Tech loss, they had the LSU loss, had the Syracuse loss, and Clemson sitting there at 1-3 through the first 4 games of the season, to bounce back and get to where they are now and get to 7-5 if they beat Furman and South Carolina to close out the season, which we will talk about South Carolina here in just a few minutes. Bet your bottom dollar on that one. But I feel like that's a pretty good bounce back. And, it's a pretty good bounce back to start the season 1-3, end up finishing 7-5. You go to a bowl, and it's something that, I think Dabo and the guys can really build off of going into next season. This season didn't really go how you wanted it to, but, 7-5 is better than 5-7, or, at least your season is not going to end in November. That's the key thing here. You got the contest with South Carolina on November 29th. You don't want that to be your last game. And now it's not going to be your last game because your floor is 6-6. You're still going to make a bowl because you're not going to lose to Furman. So, but either way, I feel like a pretty good turnaround for Clemson here on a little bit of a finish the season on a little bit of a high note if you can manage it. But other than that, though, very, like I said, boring football game. If you watched it, you understand where I'm coming from on that one. Just a, snooze fest. If you don't like third down conversions, or if you like third down conversions, I wouldn't have, hope you didn't tune into that game Friday night because they were non-existent. So we had a big storyline. I'm going to go ahead and jump right into it, get the monkey off my back, so to speak. We're going to talk about this epic collapse that we saw in College Station with South Carolina. I know we just talked about South Carolina briefly a second ago, said we'd get to it, so here we are. Because this was the all-time choke job from a coach that I have seen in a very long time. And don't get me wrong, I understand Mike Elko and this Texas A&M staff really good at making adjustments. They make good halftime adjustments. Yeah, I understand that. But listen, when you are a coach getting paid what Shane Beamer is getting paid to coach the South Carolina Gamecocks, to blow a 27-point lead, you go up 30-3 at halftime, and you manage to lose that football game 31-30. You can't even manage a point, a single point, in the second half. Just the choke job of all choke jobs. I mean, this was Falcons Patriots Super Bowl type choke job right here. This was terrible. And some of the elements that we saw in that game were present in this one. It's like South Carolina was beating A&M up front in the first half. South Carolina was actually doing fairly well, moving the ball, getting the ball down the field. They were doing all the right things. And then just some of the most conservative play calling that I've seen in the second half allows Texas A&M to get back in it. I mean, you come out of halftime, you're up 30-3. The worst thing that you can do is start to get conservative when you're calling those plays. I mean, I don't get sometimes the, you start the game. You kick a couple field goals if you're South Carolina. But then it's just like, just all of a sudden, just this avalanche. We see 17 points, 13 points, first quarter, second quarter points, mind you. Texas A&M couldn't do nothing. And just, I'm going to say something really quick. I like Shane Beamer. I really do. I like him as a person. He's got to go. This Carolina job needs to be posted. They need to get rid of him. Because this is inexcusable. To me, this is like, we had heard some rumblings earlier in the season that South Carolina was thinking about getting rid of Shane Beamer. A few weeks ago, heard some rumblings through some sources and talking to some people that we might see it. Now, I think it's inevitable. I don't think it's a matter of if it'll happen. I'm thinking it's a matter of when it will happen. And I do believe that this is, happening at the end of this season. All in all, though, as much as we could talk about the negative part of South Carolina, as much as we can talk about that and how they blew the game and, that's where this game was won and lost. It really wasn't. And I'd love to give some props to Texas A&M on this one as well because, there's a lot of teams out there that down 30-3 at halftime, there's a lot of teams out there that would quit in this scenario, quit in this situation. And, this game turns into an absolute blowout. But this just shows the level of buy-in, for Mike Elko's team. Shows the level that they are bought in to be great. And I'm telling you, the culture shift at Texas A&M since Mike Elko has got there is very noticeable. You can tell. You watch. If you watch this Texas A&M team during the Jimbo Fisher era, during the Kevin Sumlin era, you saw some good teams. You saw during Kevin Sumlin's era, you saw a guy by the name of Johnny Manziel. You saw during the Jimbo Fisher era, you saw them take down Slay the Giant, beat Alabama at Kyle Field that one time. But there's something different. And this has always been a team where over the last few years, the butt of the jokes in November have been Texas A&M about how they can look like world beaters up until November, and it's like they'll blow it in November. They'll blow their season in November at some point. And this was one of those scenarios where I even caught myself thinking it at halftime, 30-3. Oh, here it is. This is where Texas A&M chokes because this is what they are notorious for. And what I will say is this team, or Texas A&M, I don't think they win this game on Saturday with Jimbo Fisher as the head coach. Likewise, I don't think that they win this game with Kevin Sumlin as the head coach, unless you got Johnny Manziel playing quarterback for you, and then you always have a chance. But I think the culture difference and the buy-in difference is what you're seeing in College Station between regime changes from Sumlin to Fisher to Elko. I'm pretty sure that's what you're seeing is just a difference. So Texas A&M gets to 10-0, first time since '92, I believe it is, or something like that. It's been about 30 years since they've been 10-0. But even this, to me, the stat that really stuck out to me is Texas A&M can turn the ball over 4 times, get outrushed 2-1 by their opponent, essentially, still manage to put up 500 yards of offense and win a football game and score 30 points. Obviously, you don't want to turn the football over 4 times against competition like Georgia or Alabama or anybody kind of at the top of the SEC. But it still speaks a lot to this team's resilience that they turn the ball over that many times and they can still manage to win football games against a very upset-minded South Carolina football team. But, one thing, Marcel Reed, that's one thing he's got to clean up. The interceptions, you can't turn the football over 4 times. A&M's eventually on this collision course with Atlanta to go to the SEC championship. Looks like, unless we see an upset and Auburn beat Alabama here in a couple weeks, it looks to be it will still be Texas A&M and Alabama and Atlanta for the SEC championship. You're not going to turn the football over 4 times and beat Alabama if you're Texas A&M. So that's one thing needs to get buttoned up fast if you're Mike Elko and this staff. You got to stress the importance of not turning the football over, especially in key situations. Other than that, though, like I said, it speaks to the resilience of the team, speaks to the resilience of Marcel Reed. He still played his game. He didn't appear to gun shy even after the interceptions. Texas A&M couldn't really run the football very well. And that's an area that, I feel like they've been good at this year so far. They've had some injury problems here over the last few weeks. So it's kind of just one of those things. Le'Veon Moss is injured. Reuben Owens got a little bit banged up in this football game. So that's a key area there. You don't want to turn too one-dimensional, but you can win these football games with Marcel Reed, with Mario Craver, with KC Concepcion, just game breakers with game-breaking speed, and they can get the job done if in the event that they need to. Another area of controversy that we have to talk about, everybody's been talking about it, the Texas cop, the Texas A&M police officer that bumps into Nick Harbor in the tunnel, bows up at him, whatever. Like, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this, but to me, that's stupid. Like, it was dumb on his part. Like, just, for one, what was he doing in there? I don't think anybody knows. Like, what are you doing in there for starters? But, like, to bow up at a kid in that scenario, when you're a grown man, which Nick Harbor's a grown man too. But at the end of the day, this is still a college kid. Don't understand it. There's some words that my daddy always taught me that it's always those that bark the loudest. And if y'all catch my drift, you know where I'm going with that. So I'll leave it at that. But the officer's been dismissed from his duties, not as a cop. I haven't heard that, but dismissed from his duties as far as being able to work the football games there in College Station. So wherever whatever, I've seen a lot of people talking about it. I figured I'd have to mention it just briefly. Not going to spend a whole lot of time on it. Like I said, we're going to move right into some other games. So Oklahoma goes into Tuscaloosa and cancels Bama's revenge date. And it's something we talked about on the prediction show Thursday, where said big revenge spot for Alabama. You got mollywopped in Norman last year, 24-3. Got beat by 3 touchdowns. We've heard the excuses all year long from the Alabama fans about the refs. Oh, the refs cost us that football game. Refs don't score 21. The refs don't beat teams by 21 points, okay? Bad calls don't get you beat by 21 points. You got stomped. Own up to it, and that's all that needs to be said about that situation last year in Norman. But this was a little bit of a redemption spot, a little bit of a revenge spot for Alabama here to beat the team that embarrassed them last year. And Oklahoma goes in, Alabama plays statistically, when you look at the numbers of this football game, not a bad football game at all for Alabama. I mean, you look at the fact that 406 yards of total offense, 326 passing. The issue with Alabama, turnovers, 3 of them. 2 fumbles lost, putting the ball on the deck will never win you football games. And then the interception, the pick 6 that you had as well. Here's the... I know that I said it at times. I think I said it Thursday. I think I've said it a couple times on some other episodes that, this season so far. Alabama's inability to run the football is going to be a problem. I know I said it last Thursday. I've said it numerous times before. Their inability to run the football is a problem. And we saw that against an Oklahoma defense. Now, Oklahoma's got, arguably the best defense in the SEC. One of the best defenses in the country. You knew it was going to be tough sledding. But to not really commit to it, I guess. They did commit to it with 33 rush attempts, but 2.4 yards a carry. This Alabama offensive line is not a typical Alabama offensive line. I mean, sure, you got Caden Proctor, you've got the stars, you've got the guys, the name recognition up front, but where are the just mountain movers, the dog that they just get after it for Alabama? Your guys like Leatherberry, your guys like Booker, like the guys that'll just push people around for 4 quarters. You know what I mean? Like, Bama just doesn't have that. The reason that, Bama has had to play a style of offense this year where Ty Simpson has one of the fastest snap-to-pass times in the country, the reason they have to get that ball out fast, that offensive line can't hold up. I mean, not against a good pass rush. I mean, yeah, they're going to hold up against, UL Monroe. They're going to hold up against other teams like that. But a team with a good pass rush, and we've seen it sometimes throughout, we've seen it at times throughout the year. But here is where it finally kind of came to a head for Alabama in this scenario, where not being able to hold up on the offensive line, not being able to run the football consistently was a problem pretty much all game and continues to be a problem for Alabama. I mean, there's no reason. It's not like Oklahoma jumped out to a 3-score lead and Alabama had to give up running the football. It was 17-14 at halftime. 3-point game going into the second half. Alabama had the whole play sheet at their disposal, the whole playbook. But this team just cannot run the football. And I think it's time to talk about Ty Simpson a little bit too, because I think a lot of people have been, don't get me wrong, great quarterback, great leader. But he has flaws. And one of those key flaws for Ty Simpson is the fact that he cannot throw the ball accurately down the field. So Alabama's offense, people are starting to figure out how to defend it. Oklahoma defended it very well. Masterclass from Brent Venables. You got to collapse the pocket, pressure on Ty Simpson, keep him from setting his feet, keep him from throwing. And, Oklahoma had a ton of DB. Oklahoma was getting pressure on Ty Simpson with just their front. And that is a problem for Alabama because more people in coverage equals less opportunities downfield. Or in this case, passing the football, Alabama, generally Ty Simpson, is passing the ball 12, 13 yards and in. He's not really going past that. Like I said, one of his passer rating when he gets out to 15, 20 yards, it just drops off. So you have to give you have to give things time to develop. But when you got the pass rush that Oklahoma has, they're able to collapse that pocket. It's tough sledding. And, Alabama still, I feel like they're still going to be fine. I wouldn't really mail it in. Alabama fans, you see them, I've seen videos over the last, 24 hours that, it has been, we need to fire DeBoer. DeBoer's not the guy, this, that, we need to show DeBoer the door. And I've seen it all over the last 24 hours. And I can tell you, I feel like Kalen DeBoer's a good coach. I don't know. I'm sure there's people out there that you could go get. The problem is the buyout amount for Kalen DeBoer is expensive, very expensive. I'd really watch it, there. But it's fan base full of brats. It really is. I'd hate to know I had to deal with that fan base if I'm a head coach. Saban did a very good job with it in his 2 decades at the helm there for that program. But, it's probably why Saban's like, I'm done. I'm not coming back. I don't want to deal with it again. You can kind of see that. But, they're still going to be playing in Atlanta, barring something crazy happening against Auburn. Because like I said, they don't have, they got East Illinois, Eastern Illinois next, and then they go to Auburn. Going to Auburn, mid-afternoon game, I think is what they're talking. Maybe, well, it's a flex. So it's either going to be a 3:30 kick, 3:30 to 4:30 kick, or it's either going to be a 6 to 8 kick. And night game in Jordan-Hare, Auburn's defense is definitely a team to watch out for, a unit to watch out for, because that's something we'll talk about. We'll give it a couple weeks. I'm not going to foreshadow too much there, but I will say it's not a spot where Alabama needs to walk into Jordan-Hare Stadium and just expect to win the football game, because Auburn's defensive front, another defensive front that can make things difficult for Ty Simpson, just like Oklahoma did in this matchup this past weekend. So, all right, moving right on. Let's do some rapid fire scores for just a second, and then we'll jump into a more kind of in-depth analysis of a couple more games. So Indiana pulls away from Wisconsin 31-7. Ohio State beats UCLA 48-10, and here's one thing I will mention about Ohio State. Ohio State's good. They're legit. You talk about a team that I've said it multiple times before, maybe on here. I've said it on social media. I commented back to somebody yesterday was saying this. The embarrassment of riches that Ohio State has currently on both sides of the football. Ohio State has the best off-ball linebacker in college football in Arvell Reese. The best DB in college football in Caleb Downs. Arguably the best quarterback in Julian Sand. And then arguably the top 2 wide receivers in the country in Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate. Just an embarrassment of riches. And not to mention, Ohio State's got other players. Those are just the guys that really just stick out. Ohio State's got other players. So, talent-wise, yes, Ohio State's tops in the country by far. The problem for me with Ohio State is I'm waiting. I'm so ready for them to play a team with a pulse. We need a good barometer game for Ohio State. It's not going to come against Rutgers. They go to Ann Arbor to finish the season, so maybe. The future weather forecast for that one looks really gloomy. A lot of snow, a lot of very cold weather, snow, you name it. It looks like a game that weather-wise could favor Michigan, and that's the future. I don't know how much attention y'all pay to a future weather forecast, because, Mama always said there's 2 people that lie, and that's a weatherman and a politician. So don't listen to either of them. But the futures has that game being a very, weird weather forecast. So that might play into Michigan's hand on that one, but that's going to be the next team that, Ohio State's going to play that can kind of match them physically. They haven't ran into a team this year that can match them physically. Now, the first game of the season against Texas, winning that game 14-7, other than that, I mean, you look at who they've played. I mean, Grambling, Ohio, Washington, Minnesota, Illinois, who turned out to be very fraudulent. Illinois, not as good of a football team as we thought when they originally played Ohio State back on October 11th. Then you had Wisconsin, Penn State, a team winless in conference at the time that Ohio State played them. Then Purdue, then UCLA. So haven't really played anybody that can match them. So anxious, more anxious for that matchup in the big house here in a couple weeks. More anxious than I've ever been for it because it'd be a good barometer game. Now, we know what Ohio State's working with. If Ohio State goes into Ann Arbor and just mollywops Michigan and beats them by 20 or 30 points, maybe even double digits, it's like, okay, that's a good it's a good gauge to see where we're at. And no, I'm not saying that Ohio State's not worthy of the number 1 ranking. So Ohio State fans out there that listen to this show, just hold your horses, calm down. Like I'm not telling you that you're not that good or whatever. I'm just saying, like, I'm ready to see Ohio State play a team that I feel like can match them physically. And that'll be a 2-game stretch. We think about that for Ohio State. That'll be a 2-game stretch for Ohio State where we'll see Ohio State play Michigan and then play Indiana in the Big Ten championship game. So 2 games where we're really going to get a good idea of Ohio State out of those 2 matchups that they have coming. So I know I said quick fire, but got off on a little tangent there. Texas Tech beats UCF 48-9. Notre Dame beats Pitt 37-15. BYU beats TCU 44-13. Utah beats Baylor 55-28, and I think they had a bajillion rushing yards or something like that, something crazy. I think it was almost 400 yards rushing for the Utes there. It's typical Utah football. Miami beats NC State 41-7. Georgia Tech squeaks by Boston College 36-34, and I think it's time for us to have a very serious conversation about how Georgia Tech sucks. I don't think this team's good at all. I really don't. You can talk about Haynes King. You can talk about Brent Key and all this. I think this team sucks. I really think that Georgia Tech has been the beneficiary of a very soft schedule this year. When you look through this, a very soft conference in the ACC. This is the team that barely beat Colorado to start the season, 27-20. Barely got by Clemson, gave up 24 to Temple, took overtime to beat Wake Forest, who's not that good of a football team. And then, got smacked around by NC State on the road. And then now, the latest edition of Georgia Tech, the latest episode and the latest edition of This Team Sucks features Georgia Tech having to come from behind and beat a Boston College team that was 1-9. Now 1-10. But 1-9. A Boston College team that was terrible. And by terrible, I mean if Boston College lined up against Girl Scout Troop 44 next weekend, I'd take Troop 44 and the points. That bad. This is a horrible football team. And we've got Georgia Tech at 9-1. Is there a more fraudulent team in the country than Georgia Tech? Is there a more fraudulent team when you look at the ranking that just looks, you watch this team play on the field, you watch them against Boston College, and then you see the record and you see the ranking, and you're just scratching your head. What the heck are we doing? And I apologize because I had Georgia Tech in my CFP rankings. So I think I owe the committee a little bit of an apology. When I saw Georgia Tech ranked as far back as they were, I'm like, wait a minute, guys. Like, Georgia Tech at 12 sounds pretty good. No. I'm out on that now. I'm out. I'm all the way out. Like, no. Like, I will release later in the week, the college football playoff rankings. The latest edition will be released tomorrow night. So I will make mine, and then I will feature those at the start of the prediction show on Thursday. So we'll talk about that. And newsflash, Georgia Tech's not going to be in my top 12 on Thursday when y'all hear it from me. And then on top of that, Georgia Tech's got Pitt coming to town, and they got Georgia. So I feel like personally Georgia Tech's going to close the season with 2 straight losses. I mean, I would think so. They just haven't showed me anything. It was a team that looked really good earlier in the season. I think they're starting to get a little bit of wear and tear because of the fact that I feel like they overuse Haynes King. I feel like you're starting to see the fuel needle get a little bit low on him. I think he's starting to run out of gas. He doesn't look near as dynamic as he did earlier in the season. I think he's starting to kind of have some wear and tear. You know, if you play the NCAA football 26 game, you can see the wear and tear. I think Haynes King's whole body right now is red. I think he's done. I don't think that this is a guy that, you know, when you run him as much as they've run him and you ask as much as they have asked of him this year, eventually he's going to run out of gas. You know, there's nobody that's conditioned that well that they're not going to. But, you know, that's tough ask for a kid to basically carry a whole team on his back every single week. So for a minute, I thought that Iowa had USC dead to rights. For a minute. I mean, this game at one point, it was one of those things where it was like, oh man, like 14-7, 21-7 Iowa. You know, Gronowski threw that pass to Reese Vanderzee in the end zone there, go up 21-7. I think that like 3 minutes left till halftime. I'm like, oh man, this isn't looking good, because I said if Iowa gets a multi-score lead, if they get a 2-touchdown lead and they can get into the second half, and they can really control the clock, that we can have they could beat USC. USC then comes out, second half, drives, right before the second half, which proved to be very big for them. You know, they drive the field there, 30 seconds left till halftime, kick a field goal, 21-10. They get the ball to start the second half, so stole a little bit there. Get back within one score. They kick a field goal there, 21-13. At that point, I'm like, okay, now they have life again. One score game here in the third quarter. Now they have life again. And then just a USC defense that kept, Iowa in check the rest of the football game. And the offense scored 2 touchdowns, one late in the third and one early in the fourth. That was pretty much them sealing the deal there, 26-21. But, the Iowa team that shows a lot of fight. I mean, they really do. I mean, 320, total yards. They're not going to pass for a ton of yards. Turnover proved to be costly. The interception thrown by Gronowski proved to be kind of costly there in the moment that he threw it. But it was also a game where, when you talk about the fact that Iowa was able to run the football as effectively as they were, but you look at the time of possession, the difference in the metric there's not that much of a difference. I mean, you're talking about a minute difference between possession of Iowa and USC. 30 minutes and 44 seconds for Iowa, 29 minutes and 16 seconds for USC. So, this was a very Iowa-esque game. My prediction on this one, my score prediction, got it in my notes here. Y'all bear with me here for just a second, and I will look it up, was 26-23 USC. Now, we were right on that. I mean, that was close. That's about as close as you're going to get. But, I felt that this was a game that we would see, a little bit of level of competition from Iowa against a team that, obviously is more talented than them. I mean, when you look at the quarterback position, USC is more talented. When you look at the wide receiver position, more talented. I'd argue that the only point I would argue is that Kamari Moulton is better than King Miller, Waymon Jordan when he's healthy and playing. I'd argue that Kamari Moulton's the better back, but Kamari Moulton with 15 carries and 90 yards, decent day on the ground himself. But ultimately, though, USC's just got, they got the dudes, and that's about all I'm gonna say about that. So Michigan takes a last second field goal for Michigan to beat Northwestern. Michigan and Georgia Tech need to play a game. They need to play a game against each other, and the loser earns the title most fraudulent. Because Michigan, Georgia Tech, to me, are the two most fraudulent teams in college football. Michigan at 8-2 at number 18. That tells you everything you need to know. You know, the voters don't respect Michigan. Why would you? I mean, it feels like they're in a dogfight with an unranked opponent that's barely 500 every single week, needs a last-second field goal to lift them past these teams. Don't get me wrong, though. You know, the development of Bryce Underwood this year so far is probably the most important thing. I don't think a lot of people around the Michigan program, fans included, thought that this was a team that was going to compete for a national championship this year anyway, with a freshman quarterback pretty much making his first start, playing all year as the guy. Don't think after all that you lost last year from that team, you know, Michigan's still in kind of that rebuilding phase, so to speak, this year. But, you know, to have to rely on a kicker to beat teams like Northwestern, I don't have any faith in Michigan. And, you know, like I said, the game against Ohio State could be interesting, but I don't know. Maybe I honestly see Michigan getting slapped around. If the weather's not good, it's cold, it's snowing, it favors Michigan because they're going to be physical, but Justice Haynes is now going to miss the rest of the year with an injury. That puts a little bit of a monkey wrench in the operation, so to speak, for Michigan. It's one of the things they want to do. They want to run the football. Justice Haynes was that guy. He's having a phenomenal year up to this point until he gets hurt, and now he's not going to play the rest of the year. So it kind of changes things from that in that perspective for Michigan. So going forward, you know, Michigan's going to close the season. I fully expect Michigan to go 9-3. I fully expect them to beat Maryland and then lose to Ohio State. And I don't think they're just going to lose to Ohio State. I know we've said it for years now, like 2-3 years in a row, that Michigan's beat Ohio State. Something feels different about this Ohio State team this year. I just really don't think that Michigan's going to have really anything for them coming into that football game. So moving on, ACC contest, Virginia takes out Duke 34-17. It's a game I picked. I picked Virginia to win this football game, and Virginia ends up winning it. Chandler Morris ends up playing. There was talks he was in concussion protocol, that he might not play. Ends up going for 316 yards, 2 touchdowns, 23 of 35. Throws a couple picks, though. But 34-17 didn't matter. They stayed aggressive. And Jamari Taylor on the ground also had a very good game for Virginia as well. 133 yards on 18 carries and 2 touchdowns. And another name I mentioned on Thursday, and a guy that, really showed out, Trell Harris as well. 161 yards on 8 catches, over 20 yards per catch and a touchdown. Just lit them up all game long. So Virginia kind of puts themselves in that driver's seat in the ACC with this win over Duke. And, we're, we see it, and, I'm just, it's abysmal, that conference, that this Virginia team, I think they're good. I think they're decent, but this is a team that could win the ACC this year. Wild to think that. Wild to think it. With the Florida States of the world, the Clemsons of the world, the Miamis of the world, that Virginia's most likely going to win the ACC this year. Crazy. So 2 teams that have fallen out of my good graces. I'm not going to go into their games. Frankly, they pissed me off. 2 teams I'm not betting anymore. If I do go to bet these teams and y'all find out that I'm betting these teams, y'all need to shake me. Y'all need to get with me. We need to do an intervention. We need to stop it, because the Memphis Tigers, I just want to grab them by the throat and shake them. Like losing in the fashion that they lose in. Unreal. Like I'm done betting. I'm done betting Memphis. Not betting them anymore. To lose to East Carolina, team you should have beat. Terrible. 31-27 East Carolina on that one. Not betting them again. Like, no way. Another team that I'm not going to bet anymore is the Cincinnati Bearcats. Now, this was not a team that I thought that had a chance to win the Big 12, anything like that. I feel like Utah and Texas Tech are the best teams in the Big 12. But Cincinnati was one of those teams that I thought surely they beat Arizona, right? No. Not happening there either. So 2 of my bad beats for the weekend there on that front was betting Cincinnati to win, betting Memphis to win. Terrible. Falling out of my good graces. I'm not betting them again. Like, heck with it. Not doing it. Navy beats South Florida 41-38. Tennessee beats New Mexico State 42-9. Can't remember. I think I already mentioned that one. Florida, Ole Miss. Ole Miss had to kind of fight a little bit of adversity, but outscores Florida 14-0 in the second half to beat the Gators. This game was a 24-20 game at halftime. For a minute there, Florida looked pretty inspired. Looked like, man, this might be a situation where Florida could pull the upset. But Lane Kiffin's defense steps up in the second half, holds Florida scoreless, 14-0, like I said, in the second half, and Ole Miss gets a 10-point win at home, 34-24 over the Gators. Fans chanting, "We want Lane," after the game was over. I understand it, but I don't know. That to me is a toss-up. Now you've got to take into account Ole Miss now at 10-1. Next week they've got, or not next week, they have kind of a bye. Then they have the Egg Bowl on the 28th, and is the last game of the year for Ole Miss, going to Starkville to play Mississippi State in the Egg Bowl. So now Lane Kiffin's gearing up for a postseason run, a playoff run. So the question now is, how soon do you want to hire a guy if you're Florida or if you're LSU? Because that, to me, is a big question as far as, how soon you want somebody in there to start to line up recruits, put up the recruiting board, start calling people, start accumulating and building a staff. There's a lot of things we got to take into account. We got to take into account that Ole Miss could be playing football into January. And you've got that transfer portal window in January that would be big for an incoming coach of a program like LSU, like Florida. That portal window is huge. So the question is now is a timeline question. With Lane Kiffin at 10-1, inside the playoff rankings, that's something we definitely have to think about. How soon do you want a new guy on campus? I think some teams are going to have to wait if they want their guy. They're just going to have to wait for it. So the after the whistle game of the week on Thursday on the prediction show was Texas at Georgia. And let's just call it like it is. Texas, Georgia beat Texas like a burnt orange-headed stepchild. That's the only way to put it. This was Georgia got out the big, thick leather belt. You know what I'm talking about. Like, not the little skinny leather belt, but the big, thick, like 3 inches thick paddle leather belt, and just, tore Texas up. You grew up in the South. You grew up like a father like I had. I mean, it's not really a Southern thing, but you grew up like a father like I did. You did wrong. You knew you were going to get belt to you-know-what, and that's exactly what Texas got in Athens on Saturday night. Make no mistake about it. It was all three facets. Texas got beat on offense, beat on defense, and beat on special teams. This is just a three-phase butt whipping by way of, Texas handing it to Texas, or Georgia handing it to Texas. That makes Steve Sarkisian 0-3 against Kirby Smart as the Texas head coach. It also, I think it's 0-7. I think Steve Sarkisian's 0-7 against top 10 opponents as the Texas head coach, if I'm not mistaken. I might be corrected on that. I might be wrong there, but I think that's where he's at. Either way, this was a game where, Georgia kind of started to show the country that they're improving, and they really are. I don't think, there's a lot of teams in the country right now that, this season, the college football season now, with the, 12-game regular season schedule, then all of a sudden you've got the playoff, conference championship week, everything. This college football season now is a marathon, not a sprint. And there's nobody that understands that better than Kirby Smart, because he's got 2 national championships to show for it. But it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. It's not how you start. It's how you finish. It's all about peaking at the right time. All the cliche sayings that we talk about when we talk about college football and we talk about, these things. We talk about the fact that, it's all about when you peak. We watched an Ohio State team peak at the right time last year. An Ohio State team that had 2 losses in the regular season. We watched them peak at the right time, end up winning the national championship. So this is a scenario where I think Georgia put the country on notice on Saturday. Georgia is peaking. Everybody else, I see some teams up there in the top 5, that are kind of leveled off. They're just coasting. You've got some teams that looked really good early in the season, and now they're just, Miami's a good example of that, where they looked really good. I mean, at one point I was on this podcast arguing for Miami to be the number 1 ranked team in the country. Oh, how the turntables, And now Miami's just down. And we see a Georgia team that's just steadily climbing. And I think the thing that we see with Georgia is we see the fact that Georgia's got so many young players. There's a ton of sophomores on that defense. There's some freshmen on that defense. And we see the growth. We see them get better every single week. I mean, this was a Georgia defense that put together a really good performance against Texas. Texas only gets 23 yards rushing on 17 attempts. In the last 3 meetings against Georgia, Texas has 89 rush yards combined against Georgia. 89 combined in 3 games. So Texas' inability to run the football is really that's what makes this team a little bit different. I feel like the Texas team last year was better than the Texas team this year because of the fact that they at least had a little bit of an ability to run the football. They still didn't run the football better against Georgia, but they ran the football against pretty much everybody else. And, the fact that they are heavily penalized, they're behind the sticks, which we saw again Saturday. They get behind the sticks. They put themselves in that 3rd and 10 situation, 3rd and 11 situation. It's just not – you have to ask your quarterback who's making his first – it's his first season starting. You're asking him to be Superman every week. And that's not a recipe for success if you're Texas, to ask Arch Manning, like, hey, you got to go off every week in order for us to have a chance. You got to get the ball down the field to Ryan Wingo. Clearly Arch's favorite target. And there were some drop issues, but other than that, I just feel like Texas is just so one-dimensional. I mean, we watch them Saturday night, same thing. So Georgia finishes with 357 yards, total offense, 128 on the ground. They ran just good enough, 35 rush attempts for 128. It's good for about 3.7, 3.8 yards a carry. So ran just good enough to keep Texas honest on defense. Georgia, 40%-ish on 3rd down. So, decent on 3rd down, but, Texas 2 of 12 to contrast that, The big thing with Georgia is the aggressive play calling that we saw. I mean, Mike Bobo put this Texas defense in a blender. The first 2 touchdown drives Georgia had when they were up, like 14-3, those 2 touchdown drives, Texas, there was so much miscommunication, especially on the back end of that defense in the secondary. These guys are looking around like, where do we go? What are we doing? And I feel like all night Texas had some miscommunication problems on the defense. Yeah, I know they've had a lot of injuries. A lot of these guys are coming back and playing together, for the first time as a unit, and there's a lot of communication problems there on the back end. But you still got Colin Simmons. You still got Anthony Hill. You still got really good athletes, up front. So this is not a unit that's underwhelming. It's not a unit that's not good. This is a very good unit up front. And Georgia just made them look pedestrian at times on Saturday. Now, at times, Texas had their moments. I feel like they did do a lot better job for the most part. I mean, Georgia still broke some big runs in the second half, but in the second half, Texas, I feel like did a little bit better job up against the run. But either way, you can't beat teams like Georgia if you're one-dimensional. And that's what Georgia's trying to make you. They're trying to make you one-dimensional. And, that's what we said about Alabama. That's what I've said that about Alabama. One-dimensional offense, they're not going to win much because of that. But the moment to me, as a Georgia fan watching this football game, the moment to me where I was like, dagger in the heart, pretty much, like Texas just took a dagger in the heart. The onside kick, that was it. That to me was the icing on the cake. Georgia had just sunned Texas's defense all the way down the field, score, and then onside kick, get the ball back. Which, by the way, the rule that you can't advance an onside kick recovery is the dumbest rule ever. Like, Cash Jones walks into the end zone right there. I mean, really? But, I saw some people, I just had to say that because I saw some people saying, like, why didn't he run it? Why didn't he run it? You can't advance it. So, that's the rule. I think it's stupid, like I said. But either way, that to me was like that gut punch, knockout blow, whatever you want to call it, for Texas from Georgia. That was pretty much it for them. And then, up until that point, you saw a little bit of fight from this Texas team, but Georgia's defense played inspired. It's the most inspiring performance that I think they've played all year, especially the pressure that they were able to generate. Not so much, sacking Arch Manning 3 times was big, but to be able to get home and get the quarterback was a good thing. But then the main thing is just affecting the quarterback, because a lot of times it's not about getting sacks. It's just about making him feel that pressure, making him make some decisions. You didn't sack Arch Manning on the play where he threw the ball right into the arms of KJ Bolden and overthrows, I believe it was Wingo, and KJ Bolden intercepts it. But the pressure was there, and it made him rush the throw a little bit. And that's where we see mistakes happen. And that to me is more important than sacks. Sacks are an overrated stat to verify your defense or validate validate your defense as an elite defense to me. Like, I don't care personally about sacks. I really don't. Affecting the quarterback is more important than sacks. That to me is collapsing the pocket, not giving him room to operate. Things like that are more important. So, and that's what we saw with Georgia do a phenomenal job with that. But, it's like I said, Texas A&M, you got outcoached, or not Texas A&M, Texas got outcoached on, multiple levels, of this football game, top to bottom, outcoached, outplayed, outsmarted, you name it. That was where this game was at. And I was expecting it to be a little bit of a closer contest, but Georgia just ran with it. This Georgia team, and we'll talk about trajectory now with Georgia and Texas. This Georgia team is a Georgia team that after we see them on Saturday, the trajectory is steadily climbing for this Georgia team. They're going to be 4th in the CFP rankings tomorrow night, I would imagine. But this is a Georgia team that's climbing. They're getting better with every passing week. And it's a team that's scary for anybody, especially right now. It appears that they're not going to play in Atlanta, so they're going to get a little bit of rest, get some players back, and then come into the playoff fresh. There's some storylines there, but that Georgia team that played Saturday, they play with anybody, they can beat anybody. Yes, that includes Ohio State. I fully believe that Georgia team on Saturday shows up to play Ohio State, they can beat Ohio State 100%. Texas, the argument that Texas, that people are making about Texas, 9-3 team. Can they make the college football playoff? I think the short answer here for me is no. Now, if they would have lost this game 23-21, 24-23, or something like that, if they would have made it close within a field goal, I feel like if Texas would have covered the spread in this football game, I feel like that you have a little bit of an argument there with the schedule that they've played, losing a close game, and then turning around and say beating Texas A&M, because that's the only chance you would have. But beating Texas A&M at the end of the season would put you in that, maybe territory. I still don't think you'd be a shoo-in. You'd still have to have some help. But that would definitely be a scenario where we could make an argument. You could formulate an argument and maybe a justification for putting Texas in the top 12 at 9-3. But now, 25-point loss to Georgia. I think they're dead in the water. It doesn't matter. I don't think it matters what they do against Texas A&M. I think Texas's season is over. I think they're going to play, they got 2 more games. They'll play those. They'll go to a pretty good bowl game, and then that'll be the end of Texas' season. Other than that, though, it's not a bad season when you think about it. Your quarterback's making he's got his first season. Definitely will go back to the drawing board on some things. I know Steve Sarkisian will change some things during the offseason. Maybe hire a new special teams coach because Georgia continues to embarrass you on that front every time you play them. That to me would be one thing I would probably take a look at between the fake punt last year in Atlanta and then the onside kick this time. It's just, just taking advantage of a situation there. But, yeah, I mean, they'll get back. They'll go back to the drawing board in the offseason. I think Texas will come back stronger next year. Arch Manning will have another year under his belt, another camp, another fall camp, another spring camp, everything. That will, he will only get better from here, and he will be better for it, next year. I fully anticipate Texas to finish the season 8-4. I do not see them beating A&M, just mainly because A&M and Georgia, very similar styles. The way that they call plays, the way that they run their offense, very similar styles, the way they play defense. There's some similarities there. So I don't expect Texas to beat Texas A&M at the end of the year, but it is rivalry weekend, so anything can happen. But we will obviously talk about that on that week when we talk about the prediction show. But a big win in Athens for Kirby and the Dogs, and 9-1 now going into a week where they will play Charlotte, and then they will play Georgia Tech to close the season. And then chaos would have to ensue for Georgia to go to Atlanta, but it could happen. I mean, Georgia wasn't really slated to go to Atlanta last year, and they got some help. Some teams lost, put them in that situation, so it could happen again. But it's also been, it's been a great day. It's been a great weekend, great Saturday. It's been a great episode so far. I've enjoyed y'all's company, you listening, you tuning in, continuing to tune in to the show. You'll never know how much it means to me that I have so many listeners that will text me, that will call, reach out, tell me how much they're enjoying the show. I really enjoy it, guys. Really enjoy people reaching out and saying that. It means a lot. Continue to do so. Like I've said, YouTube, find me on there, find me on Spotify, find me on Amazon Music, find me on Apple Podcasts, tell your ma and them, tell them all. You got to subscribe, follow on Spotify. I think it's follow on Apple Podcasts as well. But be sure if you're listening on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. Helps me out there. Hit the follow button on Spotify. Hit the follow button on Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, which I think I've got 1 listener or 2 listeners that listen on Amazon. So if you listen on Amazon, be sure to hit that button as well to save it. And then the episodes will automatically download when they release. So be sure to do that. Check me out on the social media outlets. At ATWCFB, Instagram, Facebook. Hit me up on there. Ask me questions. If you want me to talk about something on the show, send me a question, send me a DM, send me questions, whatever. I'll be sure to get it on the show. There's never been one person, and I'll say this, there's never been one question that somebody has asked me in the DM that I have not answered on the show. I'm batting 1,000 in that department, so try me. So, well, y'all have a good week. I will catch y'all on Thursday for the prediction show, as we will predict a week 13 that features, some very, I'm just going to be blunt, piss poor matchups. Now, we do have USC Oregon, which will probably get a lot of the attention. We've got a Pitt and Georgia Tech, Big 12 matchup, BYU Cincinnati, and then we also have Tennessee Florida. So we do have 4 or 5 matchups that we can definitely talk about. So I'll still be able to do an episode on Thursday and have a couple picks and a couple insights for y'all. And then we'll go over also the latest college football playoff rankings on Thursday before we get into the predictions as we normally do. Until then, y'all have a great week, and I'll catch y'all on Thursday. This has been After the Whistle. See y'all.